Welcome back to the search bar.
We're at the infancy of this and it's going to move really fast.
So I'm the SEO sommelier. What do you have a favorite wine, John, or what kind of wine do you enjoy?
I'm kind of new to wine. I grew up a beer guy.
I love that. And I love kind of the example that you gave of,
These are the attorney's decisions to make. We're providing them the vision of what the future could be and how do we get there.
I'm really excited about today's episode.
But I started as a mid-sized Missouri firm.
That makes a lot of sense. Kind of that exit strategy.
There's no magic bullet for any one firm, but by paying attention to what works and what doesn't work,
What could someone do to start working on that exit strategy? Welcome back to the Search Bar, the podcast for law firm leaders who want smarter, more sustainable growth without the guesswork. Wine optional. I am Eric Ritter, the SEO sommelier and founder of Digital Neighbor. I've spent more than a decade inside and alongside law firms, helping them grow with marketing that actually drives cases, not just clicks. On this show, we focus on what truly works, from sharper strategy and better systems to practical insights you can apply right away. That's also why I bring in subject matter experts who understand how law firms attract the right clients, increase case value, and build long-term momentum in order to grow profitability. And if you're ready to take the next step, check out my Motion for Marketing system. It starts with a free discovery session to see if it's the right fit for you and your firm. No fluff, just a clear path forward. You'll find a link to book a call with me in the show notes. I'm really excited about today's episode. I'm welcoming John Scott, a partner at Anders and the go-to virtual CFO for ambitious law firm owners. For more than 3 decades, John has helped firms across the country scale their practices, strengthen profitability, and prepare for the future with confidence. His specialty is turning complex financial data into clear, actionable strategies and fuel growth and freedom for managing partners. And that's what we're all about here at the Search Bar, all about actionable strategies. And if you want to make your law firm more profitable, scalable, and sellable by design, you will want to hear what John has to say. John, welcome to the Search Bar.
Thank you, Eric. It's great to be here.
Well, as I said in the intro, I'm the SEO sommelier, pairs my 2 passions of marketing, SEO, and wine as a sommelier. And I'm curious, before we get into everything here, what do you have a favorite wine, John, or what kind of wine do you enjoy?
I'm kind of new to wine. I grew up a beer guy, Irish Catholic. We drink beer. Some of us drink whiskey, but my youngest was in Florence, Italy for a semester abroad. And it was his second to last semester in school. And so we went over to visit him and I was introduced to Italian red wine. And so I don't have a specific wine, but the Italian red wine and probably all European wine, it just tastes different. It doesn't give you it doesn't give you a headache the next day, which I appreciate. So I have kind of converted to European and Italian wines.
Love that. I'm going to have to check that out. Some of the Italians, obviously, they've been doing wine for however long, right? 2,000, 3,000 years in Italy. That's where wine is from. So they got that secret formula there, how to grow the wine. So I'm glad that you were able to discover that when you were in Florence.
Yeah, it was a really fun trip. I would go back in a heartbeat.
That's awesome. I always tell people, there's nothing like eating Italian food in Italy. There's no substitute for that.
You gain a lot of weight while you're there.
Nothing wrong with that. Awesome. So let's get into some questions here. In the intro, we talked about, your expertise, what you do. So just as a subject matter expert, would love to hear your perspective on why law firms need a CFO. A lot of times you think about, that's just for taxes, right? But there's other reasons maybe why a law firm needs a CFO.
It's really, if you want to grow and scale your practice, you need to pay attention to data. And where I learned this was I started in accounting and you said 3 decades. Oh my God, that's been a long time. I feel old. But I started as a mid-sized Missouri firm. We got most of our referrals from attorneys. And I was very fortunate early on to meet an very entrepreneurial attorney who had several offices in the St. Louis area. And he really wanted to work on his business rather than in it. And he paid attention to data and he expanded his business across all 50 states and the UK during the 17 years that I worked with this man. And he really did it. He had the secret sauce. He could open an office in a city and in 6 months hire the second attorney and be profitable. And so I spent all that time on his finance committee watching him make decisions, but they were database decisions. And so from that, we have developed what we call profit focused accounting. So we pay attention to financial and non financial drivers and help then predict the future of a law firm. We can focus on cash management, forecasting, pipeline, their financials. And from those four key areas in profit focused accounting, we can come up with strategic decisions. These are the attorney's decisions to make. We're providing them the vision of what the future could be and how do we get there.
I love that. And I love kind of the example that you gave of, the law firm in Missouri you worked with. And you mentioned something that really I thought was interesting, profit focused accounting that looks at financial, you said, and non-financial aspects there. I'm curious if we could dig into that a little bit more and if you can share what are those financial, non-financial indicators you might be looking at.
The financial indicators are your standard rate per hour, your average rate per hour, how many hours you expect them to bill. Those are all metrics and levers that you can pull to increase productivity, increase cash flow. The non-financial things would be intake. How many at-bats are you getting and how many are converting to setting up a meeting? And it doesn't just work for hourly firms. We can convert these same things to PI firms or subscription-based firms, different ways to take a look at things, look at the levers we can pull, and more importantly, not just be the historical accountant that told you what happened, but rather be the forecasting, forward-looking accountant that tells you what could happen and what's going to happen. And when we do forecasting, some folks create a budget in December for the next year, they put it in the drawer, and the next time they look at it is towards the end of the year. We want to create a forecast that's dynamic. In other words, we're pulling it out every month, seeing where we are on that trend line, and figuring out what levers do we have to pull to stay on or exceed that trend line so that we can achieve our goals. It's a lot like taking a trip with a 10-year-old Atlas versus the GPS or the Waze app in your car, because that Waze app or the GPS can anticipate roadblocks or construction up ahead and give you a workaround. That's what we want to do for your finances.
Nice. I love that. So what you're doing is you're turning a lot of that data, whether it's financial or not, into decisions that drive law firm growth. And that's something I wanted to focus in a little bit more as well as kind of growing the firm, which you can obviously help with because you're looking behind the scenes, kind of at the numbers you've worked with other law firms. And just curious, what are kind of some of those drivers that you're seeing to turn that financial data that then helps create and drive decisions to grow the law firm?
There's no magic bullet for any one firm, but by paying attention to what works and what doesn't work, paying attention to the data, repeating the things that do work and abandoning the things that didn't work. That's the one thing I learned early on from this entrepreneur was, hey, we're going to make quick decisions. They might not be the right one, but if they didn't work, we're going to move on and try something else. And if they did work, we're going to double down.
That makes a lot of sense. Reminds me a little bit, Mark Zuckerberg used to say, move fast and break things,
Right.
which you don't want to be super aggressive, but you also need to understand what is the cost to me of not making this decision, right? Of moving too slow. And so you need to find that right balance there. And it seems like that's something that you can help law firms find is that right balance of when to make what decision and not wait too long.
And not be so stubborn to hold on to a bad decision. Recognize that it was bad, learn from it, and move forward. One of the other things we do with our clients once we start to onboard them is we have a PFMA, a profit focused maturity model assessment. And it looks at the finance function. There's 5 areas and it grades 1 through 5, 1 being ad hoc, 5 being nirvana at each of those finance functions. And we use that to assess the current state of their finance function. And they might be rocking it in 2 or 3 of those areas, and they're lagging in a couple of others. So we set goals with them over the next 6 to 12 months to get incrementally better in those areas. Because ultimately, if I want to transition my firm, and I do believe that at some point, more firms will become saleable. You're seeing some M&A activity in firms now. And as ABA and State Bar Association rules change on ethics, we'll be able to do more sales of firms not only to other attorneys, but to non-attorneys. The better your finance function is, the bigger premium you can get for your firm. I mean, it's like any business wants to go and sell. People want to see really good books and records so they can do their due diligence. But if it's a hot mess, they're going to discount the value of that business and you're not going to achieve the premium that you think you should.
That makes a lot of sense. Kind of that exit strategy. And do you have any kind of tips or actionable items that maybe someone could look at to help them design that exit strategy now? Like, how could you, after listening or watching this podcast, what could someone do to start working on that exit strategy if that is what their plan is, right? If they want to sell.
It takes a while to get ready to exit. So you can't think about it within a 3-year period of when you want to exit. You have to start thinking about it 5 to 10 years in advance and document everything. Get processes from the client coming in the door to the settlement check or the case or the matter being completed. So you have to document everything so that you can build a firm that you don't have to be at every day. And once you do that, then you can say, okay, I can make this a lifestyle firm and have others run it, or I can transition it on internally and know that it's going to be there 50 years from now, or I can go out to the market and sell it.
It's great to have options like that, right? And
It is.
kind of
It is.
setting yourself up for that. And what I heard there is, wanting to build a law firm that runs without you. And that's probably something not just someone who runs a law firm, but any business owner probably dreams of. And you mentioned, documenting processes kind of as that first step. What are some other steps that someone could take in order to make sure the law firm's able to run without them?
This is not directly answering your question, but I wanted to talk about AI a little bit. And I think AI, we're at the infancy of this and it's going to move really fast. But what it's going to do is allow smaller and mid-sized firms compete with larger firms. And I don't know if you follow college football at all, but NIL is name, image, and likeness, and it has allowed other teams to compete with the blue blood teams. People have been paying players forever; it just wasn't legal. Now it's legal to pay players, and the teams that were early to embrace NIL have really moved upstream, and that's the same thing that's going to happen for law firms and businesses that embrace AI. It's not that AI is going to replace the people, it's going to replace the repeatable tasks that are bogging us down. And so if you want to grow and scale and you can shed those repeatable, non-critical functions, how much time are you freeing up? Now, what do you do with that time? There's a guy named Zach Cass who was a co-founder of OpenAI, and I heard him speak recently at the Digital CPA conference, and he suggests that you spend more time with your family and friends. And I think that's a great way to use that time because one of the fears of AI is, oh, we're going to create all this capacity, and then the ownership group is going to fill us up with more work. That's the wrong way to think about this. The way to think about AI is let's make things better, work smarter, not harder, and let's focus on higher level things that we can do to be more valuable to our clients and to our firms.
I love that. And I'm glad you kind of took us into the AI realm because that's always on everyone's mind, right? When it comes to the firm, I had a podcast recently where someone was talking about the ethics of AI and looking at cases and case law and everything, right? And how you can't really replace that human element because that's the higher level strategy, right? You still need to do your job as a lawyer and understand the ins and outs of this case in order to be successful if you go to court or if you go in front of a judge or a jury. But to your point, there's so many other things that could be automated, those repeatable tasks there and everything. And I love the analogy of college football, right? Letting you compete with the big boys out there, right? The bigger programs. And the same thing for a law firm. You might have, fewer personnel, fewer resources, but you can still compete with the larger firms as long as you are automating those repeatable tasks out there. So I think that just makes a lot of sense and also helps, I guess, be more profitable and grow the firm in that way as well.
Right. There is an investment on the front end. I mean, you're going to have to spend some time learning and training. And you're right. You have to do this the right way. You have to have your internal information, your client information protected. You don't want that out in the interwebs. But you also want to have ethical uses of AI. So you have to have a set of rules internally, what can be done, what can't be done, and then you have to enforce that.
Yeah, I love that. And that makes so much sense. Just like with any other new technology, you need to have that policy and understand what should that usage look like from a And that should be on a firm by firm basis out there. Absolutely. So you mentioned kind of designing the exit strategy takes 5 to 10 years, right? Where how does that play in with retirement, right? Is that only for someone, hey, I'm getting ready to retire? I need to think 5, 10 years ahead. Or if I'm looking to sell my firm, we talk about the different options there. But is there a difference between someone who's looking to potentially exit the firm versus someone who's looking to retire?
Well, I think, we have to set a couple ground rules here. Attorneys generally don't retire. Some do, and I applaud them for that because you need to have another life to go to. And it says to the younger partners and the younger people in your firm, I'm not going to block you forever and take all the money. There is an opportunity for you here to keep going. So I think if you look at it from the standpoint of, I'm going to retire, you should always be building a business that doesn't need you. And then you can feel good about leaving your keys on the desk and walking away and everything's going to be good. If you're looking to sell internally to your other partners, then you want to develop those young partners and bring them along. If you look at the health of a professional services firm, the first thing you should look at is the average age of the partner group. If it's in the 50s or late 50s, that's not a healthy firm because they don't have any young leaders that are coming up. If it's skewing towards late 30s, early 40s, then that's a healthy firm and they've done the work that they needed to do to transition that firm and carry it on forever. If you're thinking about selling a business, and I want to say that in any business, whether it's a law firm or a pastry shop, as soon as you start that business, you should be thinking about the exit, which means that all your processes are repeatable. If you have three partners, there's not three different ways to do an engagement letter. There's one firm way. There's good billing hygiene. I'm cleaning out the whip. I'm sending out bills on a regular basis. If it's a PI firm, I am monitoring cases in our case management system and making sure that they are moving along and nothing's getting stuck. And we had a firm that was kind of a hybrid. It did hourly billing, it did some contingency work, and it did some fixed fee work. And they had one partner who hadn't billed all year. And it really put him in a financial crunch. And then once they got him to bill, that's why they hired us, because he hadn't billed about $1 million all year. And he did go ahead and bill it, and they did get healthy, but they had to live on the line of credit for about 2.5 months because people don't always just pay when you send them a bill, especially when it's 6 months in arrears. They don't have that pain point anymore when you give them a bill. If you went in and got your transmission fixed, you need your car. So the guy fixes it and you write him a check. But if he sent you a bill 6 months later and your car's been working along, you don't really feel the pain point about paying him. So the point is the good billing hygiene, your finance function, repeatable processes, that's what's going to help you either transition, retire, or sell that business.
And you mentioned there kind of that was a great example of why that firm brought you in, John and Anders there. And I'm curious what other use cases there are, or what other kind of scenarios the law firms might be facing when they should reach out to you or Anders.
Anytime you lose an internal financial person and you want to go upstream, our model is a subscription-based model. You pick and choose what you want and you pay on a weekly basis for our work. There's no long-term commitment. So we have a pricing tool that we go through, and there's three legs of the stool. There's the accounting function, there's the advisory function, and the tax function. And if you just want advisory, that's all you pay for. If you just want the accounting piece, that's all you pay for. Use case wise, we had a PI firm that their practices for tracking prepaid case cost was atrocious, and they were losing a lot of reimbursable cost. They probably have $800,000 or $900,000 of cost on their balance sheet. So these are dollars that they've invested in cases that when the case settles, they're going to get back. But if they don't get into that prepaid case cost, they can never recover them. It's like losing a case. I don't know if you follow Morgan & Morgan, but John Morgan says, you're not going to be hurt. When I lose a case, it's my money. It's his investment. And that's completely true. And attorneys get really good at picking cases they can win. But if you don't track those prepaid case costs, whether it's a expert witness or a court filing fee, and it just gets paid by your firm, yeah, you can write it off, but it would be better to get that money back when you win the case. So they weren't tracking those case costs. We came in, had them use their case management system better, set up a set of procedures to ensure that it was happening. And boy, those prepaid case costs rose, and that's painful. But when those cases settle, that money is recouped.
That's a great use case there. I appreciate you sharing that, John. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you want to make sure the listeners, viewers at home are aware of about you, or any kind of final tips for people out there?
I think when you think about your law firm growing and you want to upgrade your finance function, you might have had an office manager who knew QuickBooks and knew your case management system, and now she's retiring. You really need someone to work with the next person who's doing that internally to upgrade them and to upgrade your finance function. And when you go out and you look at the universe of who you could hire, whether it's a really experienced law firm controller or an actual CFO who's got experience with law firms, it's a big commitment. You're committing to a decent salary, could be large, plus overhead, and you might not pick the right person. If you consider outsourcing, and law firms outsource many different things, whether it is expert witnesses, payroll, the HR function, if you consider outsourcing your finance function, it's really a low risk. The value proposition is it's going to cost you about 80% of the commitment you would have had hiring someone internal or a team internal, and there's no commitment. And from that, when you hire Anders Virtual CFO Services, you're not just getting a VCFO, you're getting an accountant and a technology person. So you're getting a team of people for the price of one bad hire internally. And there's no long-term commitment. You pick and choose what you want. If we get 6 months down the road and you say, hey, I'd like you guys to do payroll, we flip the switch, reprice it, and going forward, you pay for that.
I love that. So you guys are not one size fit all. You can really stretch and bend any way that a firm might need your services.
Right. And that's what so many consultants have, a quiver of arrows, and they say, here's your solution. We want to listen to clients, figure out what their pain points are, and then address those pain points.
Love that, John. This was a fantastic conversation. I'm so glad you came on today and provided such great takes on how law firms can grow, become more profitable, and even gain financial clarity. Before we wrap today's episode, John, can you share how our listeners can connect with you and maybe learn about you and Anders?
Sure. I'll give you 3 ways. One, I'm on LinkedIn, John C. Scott, CPA. Also on our website, anderscpa.com. And then I have a podcast myself called Judicial Dollars and Cents, and you can find that wherever you find your podcast.
Awesome. Wherever fine podcasts are served, we'll check it out. And for our listeners, if you're ready to scale smarter, not harder, and want a strategy that actually finds your firm, you can book a free discovery session through my Motion for Marketing system. You'll find the link in the show notes. If today's episode was helpful, feel free to share it with a colleague or leave a quick review. That's how more law firm leaders find the insights that need to grow with confidence. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep building a law practice you genuinely enjoy. Cheers, everyone. John, thank you so much for joining today.
Thank you, Eric.